Welcome to UNAM Chicago's CAFÉ EXPRESSO, a space for bilateral conversations with people from all walks of life. Tune in to Spanish Public Radio and follow us on social media. And now your host, Alberto Foncerrada.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our first edition of CAFÉ EXPRESSO for 2022. My name is Alberto Foncerrada, and I am your host. CAFÉ EXPRESSO is a program of UNAM Chicago in alliance with Spanish Public Radio. You can find us in UNAM Chicago's YouTube channel and social media platforms, as well as a podcast in Spotify. Today, for my first program in 2022, I am extremely happy that Ambassador Earl Anthony Wayne agreed to be my first guest. He's a very familiar face with UNAM Chicago. Welcome, Tony.
Thank you very much, Alberto. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you. Thank you for agreeing to do this. To my audience, let me just tell you a little bit about Tony. Ambassador Wayne, he's an accomplished diplomat who has served in a wide variety of positions, including as U.S. Ambassador to Mexico and Argentina. He was Deputy Ambassador in Afghanistan, Assistant Secretary of State for Economic and Business Affairs, and Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Europe. Tony left the State Department in late 2015 as a career ambassador, the most senior U.S. diplomatic rank. So, Tony, let's get to the meat and potatoes of these issues, the current issues. First of all, I wanted to ask you, last Thursday was the anniversary of the Capitol insurrection, the biggest threat to U.S. democracy in our lifetimes, for sure. What is the balance a year after, and what did you think about President Biden's address?
Well, I think clearly we're still working this through as a society. We're having the same challenges that many countries around the world are having. And I really do think it's the impact of disinformation and the spreading of lies and the effectiveness of social media of allowing ideas, good and bad, to spread very quickly and widely. And so in the United States, it's quite clear that there is still a core group of people that believe the election was stolen last year. It's a minority, but they apparently believe this very firmly. And thus, there's a real strain on American democracy. And it's really going to be up to us, the American people, to show that we care enough to keep the institutions of democracy strong going forward. Now, President Biden's speech was probably the most forceful speech he's given on these topics. And I think that was a clear, strong message in support of those democratic institutions. But we'll have to see what's going to happen over the months ahead. I certainly hope that we will, as a nation and as a society, be able to work through the differences that we have. And we're just going to see in the weeks ahead, there are going to be more public hearings, more information coming out, and we'll see if that has an impact across the nation.
Now, in terms of the parties, do you see are they going to be able to talk to each other? I mean, because you see this is practically a breakthrough because I don't see anybody talking to each other. I mean, there's only, I think, two Republicans willing to cooperate or.
Well, I think about it, of course, I'm coming at it both from an American and a diplomat. And so as a diplomat, if I were looking from the outside at the United States, and if the United States was an ally, or if I were looking in another country, I would certainly be talking about the importance of the principles of democracy, the importance of working through your differences, of finding common ground, of working from truth, and of finding ways to weeding out the misperceptions that don't have any basis in fact. And that's what we would do for our allies, our friends around the world. And I think we owe it to ourselves to work really hard for that kind of an outcome in the United States. It's clearly not going to be easy because you're right, Alberto, people aren't talking to each other or they aren't listening to each other. But what we learn in diplomacy is if you want to make progress, you have to have people listening to each other, recognizing the sound points and the firm basis that the other person's making, and then looking for that common ground. And so I would hope we can do that in the months ahead. It won't be easy, but it is very important for the survival of our democracy and the role of the United States in the world, that we do as best as we possibly can to overcome these differences and find common ways in which we can all go forward together.
Absolutely, absolutely agree. Tony, 2022 marks an important year for U.S. Mexico relations as we celebrate the bicentennial of diplomatic relations. Last year, you took part in our series of bilateral dialogues with the School of Political Sciences and our partners in UNAM, Los Angeles. What has changed since Willa spoke in March? Are you as optimistic as you were then, or where are we headed?
Well, I think we have good news, and then we still have some ongoing problems. The good news is that the Biden administration and the AMLO administration, Lopez Obrador administration, have set up a number of processes and mechanisms to talk to each other. And that's true on the economic side. We already have the USMCA agreement that needs to be implemented. It looks like people are serious about using all the mechanisms and the meetings and the reunions. That I just got to participate in part of a meeting in Dallas 2 weeks ago now, of the competitiveness committee, which is how you look forward to making North America more competitive under the USMCA. So they're using that going forward, and that means where there are disputes, they're using that also. So the United States filed a dispute against Canada on dairy, and they've prevailed. And Mexico has just filed a dispute against the United States on the rules of origin for vehicles in North America, which is a really important area. So people are using these rules and the mechanisms. That's good. We also established between Mexico and the United States a high-level economic dialogue. And what that does, it lets you work on things that aren't just trade, like all the supply chains, like the border, facilitating movement across the border, having a more modern and high-tech border, workforce development, trying to learn from each other. So that's in this framework of something called the high-level economic dialogue, which existed during the Obama years, but then was put aside under Trump. That's now back in place working. And then in North America, for the three partners, they just had convened a couple of months ago the North American Leaders Summit, which had not been held since President Obama's term. Trump was not interested in doing that. But this meeting that just took place between Trudeau, Lopez Obrador, and Biden actually agreed on a very substantive work agenda. So the three governments are going to try to work together on things that complement trade, but go beyond trade also. And so that's all positive. Getting people talking, working together, having reports, doing that. On the still really problematic side, in the economic area, there are a lot of worries in the United States about the proposed energy reform in Mexico. People think it's anti-green. It's not looking at renewable energy. They're worried about the impact of investments, including US and Canadian companies are worried about that. And from a business point of view, people are worried that the cost of energy are going to go up, and thus Mexico will be less competitive as a place to attract more investment and to produce. Then there's also a number of the policies that Mexico has adopted on regarding genetically modified agricultural products, and related to that in the United States agricultural community there's worry about. And then, as I just mentioned, Mexico is really worried that the United States is adopting an approach that sort of reflects this America First approach, both with electric vehicles, trying to give tax breaks for electric vehicles made in the United States versus those that might be made in North America, including Mexico and Canada. And then also this rules of origin, which is complicated, but it's basically what counts as a North American car, and thus you don't have to pay tariffs on it. So there are some differences in the economic area that need to be worked through. The other difference, a big problem area that I see is on public security. And we have clearly for many years, we have not been able to get on a really good sustainable path to reduce the power really of organized crime, moving drugs, especially northward, and then moving guns and money back to Mexico. And that is still a problem. And as we saw the last year in the United States, we had a record number of drug overdose deaths, most of them from fentanyl, which is a synthetic opioid largely made in China and then largely smuggled through Mexico to come into the United States. So there are real challenges in figuring out a more effective way to deal with that. Now, the two governments have agreed on a new framework, a high-level security dialogue to address this, but we need to see if they're going to make progress. And then finally, we know, because it's regularly in the news, the challenge of migration is still there, is still really serious, is complex, avoids easy answers, and deeply involves Mexico and the United States in how you can manage these human flows in a humanitarian way, but in an orderly way. And that's going to take a lot of hard work in the short term and investing in long-term solutions in the countries that and regions that these migrants come from.
Absolutely agree. And that's thank you for a very comprehensive. You covered a lot there. I just want to take before I leave you, because you were deputy ambassador in Afghanistan, and I just want to take this chance and ask you, what is your balance of what happened and where we are now? Is this a big stain in the Biden foreign policy, or what is your, like, I don't want to go into too much depth, but briefly, what do you think?
I think this has been the biggest poorly handled item in Biden's foreign policy so far. He had decided years ago that we should get out. He came in, wanted the United States to leave Afghanistan, made that decision, but it was very precipitous, and the way it was done really fueled the collapse of the armed forces of the republic in Kabul and fueled the Taliban takeover. And now we're trying to work through this terrible humanitarian crisis in which millions of people's lives are in danger in Afghanistan. And we're really in danger of wiping away the many good things that the billions and billions of dollars of investment by the United States and others over the past 20 years in Afghanistan society and economy have created. So it's a really horrible situation. You have a Taliban government with people in that government who led and carried out terrorist attacks. You have a non-representative government that doesn't include any other forces. You have a government that still is very, very questionable on how it's going to treat women and minorities. And it's not at all clear that there's going to be a representative quality to this new government in Afghanistan. It is still a government dominated by the Taliban. So there are a lot of very serious problems, the most pressing of which is the humanitarian crisis that is endangering millions of Afghan lives.
Absolutely. Wow. Well, a lot of food for thought. Tony, I truly appreciate these minutes that you gave me. I hope that we can work with you at UNAM Chicago. We were very excited to work last year, so we'll think about something, but we definitely want to get you involved. And I truly appreciate you being my first guest in my first 2022 program of Café Expresso.
Alberto, it's a great pleasure for me to join you in this first program. I look forward to working with you and give my very best wishes for the Nuevo Año to all of your listeners.
Absolutely, I will. Everyone, thank you for joining me. My name is Alberto Foncerrada. This has been another edition of Café Expresso, a program of UNAM Chicago in alliance with Spanish Public Radio. Until next time.